Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine an island nation, often thought of primarily as a tropical paradise.
Hmm.
Now, sort of juxtapose that with its connection to one of the world's most rapidly growing and, well, strategically important countries, India.
Right.
The relationship between India and Mauritius isn't just one of, distant connection. It's a bond stretching back centuries, far deeper, more intricate, and more strategically vital than you might initially assume.
Absolutely. When you look beneath the surface, you find a relationship built on this foundational bedrock of shared history and migration.
Yeah.
And it's evolved, into a sophisticated modern partnership driven by mutual strategic and economic imperatives.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating study of how historical human ties can become the cornerstone of contemporary statecraft.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've gathered a stack of sources, analyses, historical accounts, reports on specific agreements and events, and our goal is to help you quickly cut through the noise, extracting the most important insights.
Our mission really is to guide you through this relationship, from its surprising historical origins to its crucial modern dimensions in defense, security, and economics. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be well informed about why Mauritius holds such a remarkably special place in India's strategic thinking and foreign policy.
And that special place is perhaps most strikingly illustrated by a fact mentioned in our sources that truly puts things into perspective. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi was sworn into office back in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
Mauritius was the only non-SAARC nation, meaning the only country outside of India's immediate South Asian neighbors invited to that ceremony.
Yeah.
Think about the signal that sends. Among all the nations globally, Mauritius was singled out for this unique distinction.
That's not just diplomatic formality. It's a profound statement, a real statement of political priority and strategic alignment.
Right.
It tells you immediately that this isn't just another bilateral relationship for India, it's one of singular importance. It really sets the stage for understanding why India invests so heavily, both politically and strategically, in this island nation.
So, where did this extraordinary connection begin? You have to rewind the clock quite a bit, well before the modern era of strategic partnerships,
That's right. The roots go way back to the early 19th century, specifically the 1820s.
the 1820s.
Yeah. This was the period when the British colonial administration, which controlled Mauritius at the time, began the process of bringing workers from India to the island. They needed labor, you see, for the expanding sugar plantations.
And this movement of people became particularly significant after 1834. Yeah.
Exactly. The abolition of slavery across the British Empire in 1834 created a massive labor shortage on plantations in colonies like Mauritius.
Huge gap.
A huge gap. So to replace enslaved labor, the British turned to India, instituting the system of indentured servitude. This saw hundreds of thousands of Indians, primarily from Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra, migrating to Mauritius under long-term contracts, often under very difficult conditions. This was really the genesis of the large Indian diaspora in Mauritius.
But it wasn't solely agricultural labor, was it? The sources mention a different wave involving skilled workers.
That's an often overlooked but crucial detail.
Yeah.
Even earlier, when Mauritius was actually a French colony, remember,
Sure.
it changed hands between the French and British.
Ah.
There was a demand for specific skilled trades. The French needed carpenters, masons, artisans,
Right.
and they looked to India to fulfill this need. So you actually had skilled Indian workers migrating and working under French supervision long before the large-scale indentured migration under the British.
Mm-hmm.
So this layered history of migration, involving both skilled artisans and later indentured laborers, established this diverse and enduring human bridge between the two locations.
It sounds like the foundations of this connection were laid by different groups of people under different colonial powers over quite an extended period, creating a complex human tapestry.
Precisely. And this human bridge, the presence of a large population of Indian origin in Mauritius, comprising over two-thirds of the total population today,
Over two-thirds.
is absolutely foundational to the modern relationship.
Yeah.
It creates an inherent cultural, linguistic, and historical affinity that, well, it permeates every level of interaction between the two countries.
And speaking of foundational connections, you absolutely cannot discuss this history without mentioning Mahatma Gandhi.
No, you can't. His stop in Mauritius, though relatively brief in the context of his epic journey, is a deeply significant event for the island. In 1901, en route to South Africa on the SS Nowshera, Gandhi halted in Mauritius.
Okay.
While there, he interacted with the Indian community, advising them on improving their living conditions, advocating for their rights. This visit left a lasting impression.
And that impression is acknowledged in a truly unique way by Mauritius.
It really is. Mauritius chose March 12th as its national day.
March 12th.
Now, that's not a date related to their independence or any event specific to Mauritius's own history. It's actually the date Mahatma Gandhi launched the iconic Dandi March, the Salt March, in 1930.
Wow.
This choice is a direct and powerful recognition of the Gandhian contribution to Africa, explicitly linking their national identity and struggle for rights and recognition to India's freedom movement and Gandhi's philosophy. It's a symbolic gesture of, well, immense weight, highlighting the ideological resonance and shared historical journey toward self-determination.
Celebrating India's freedom struggle as their own national day, that level of cultural and ideological connection must surely pave the way for smoother diplomatic relations later on.
It undeniably does. It establishes this deep reservoir of goodwill and mutual understanding at the people-to-people level, which then translates into political comfort and trust at the state level. And India reciprocated this sense of connection relatively early. India established formal diplomatic relations with Mauritius in 1948.
1948. Now, consider that Mauritius didn't gain its independence until 1968.
Right. And that was from France initially, then the British.
So India opened diplomatic ties 20 years before Mauritius became a fully independent nation.
Exactly. This wasn't India waiting for Mauritius to become a sovereign state to engage. It demonstrates clear foresight and an early recognition by independent India of Mauritius's potential strategic importance and, of course, the significance of its large Indian origin population. India was proactively building this relationship from its own earliest days as a free nation. It wasn't an afterthought. It was a deliberate policy choice.
And this historical legacy, coupled with evolving global dynamics, has propelled Mauritius to become one of India's most crucial strategic partners today.
The sources highlight a couple of key reasons for this elevated status. Firstly, as we touched upon, there's the geography. Mauritius is located in a strategically vital position relative to the critical sea lanes of communication, the SLOCs.
Right, the SLOs.
That crisscross the Indian Ocean. These sea lanes are the highways for global trade, and a vast percentage of India's foreign trade passes through them. Ensuring their security and stability is paramount for India's economic lifeline. Mauritius sits like a crucial waypoint in this maritime network.
And the second major factor is the economic investment flow, which, as you noted earlier, often surprises people because it's primarily investment flowing from Mauritius into India.
Precisely. Mauritius has historically been a major source of foreign direct investment into India, though the nature of this flow has been complex and has evolved significantly. We'll definitely unpack that later.
Okay.
But the combination of this strategic maritime geography and the significant economic ties, layered upon that deep historical and cultural connection, is what elevates Mauritius to that unique position in India's foreign policy calculus. That 2014 invitation was a public acknowledgement of a long-standing, deeply ingrained strategic reality.
So let's circle back to that foundational point. The sources prompt us to ask, why is the deep historical migration background so foundational to the modern strategic relationship? How exactly did these early ties, the movement of people, set the stage for defense agreements and economic partnerships centuries later?
It's a classic example of diaspora diplomacy, really, at its most effective. The shared history of migration, the challenges faced by indentured laborers, the eventual rise of the Indian origin community in Mauritius to political and economic prominence. This collective narrative creates a powerful bond of solidarity and mutual understanding.
Yeah.
When over two-thirds of a nation's population traces its ancestry back to your country, you have an inherent basis for trust and cooperation that transcends purely transactional state interests. It means political leaders in both countries have a built-in constituency that values the relationship.
It's like a cultural and historical safety net that makes high-level strategic cooperation more feasible, maybe easier.
Exactly. It lowers the barriers to trust. Imagine discussing sensitive defense cooperation or complex economic treaties with a country where there's minimal historical or cultural connection. It's possible, of course, but it requires building trust from scratch.
Right.
With Mauritius, that trust is, to a significant degree, already baked into the relationship through centuries of shared human experience. This foundation allows strategic cooperation to flourish in areas like maritime security, where mutual trust is absolutely critical. It provides a political and social platform upon which the strategic partnership can be built and sustained, making it much more resilient than relationships based solely on immediate geopolitical convenience.
That makes perfect sense. The human story underpins the state-level strategy. And that leads us directly into the core strategic element, defense and security cooperation.
Given Mauritius's location in the Indian Ocean, its strategic geography is paramount. Protecting those crucial sea lanes of communication isn't just an Indian concern, it's a shared concern, and it forms a deep dimension of the relationship. Both nations rely on the stability and security of these maritime highways.
And India has clearly made a significant commitment to enhancing Mauritius's capabilities in this domain.
Over many years, India has heavily invested in bolstering Mauritius's strategic and defense capabilities.
Hmm.
This isn't just about, providing equipment, it's about building a comprehensive security partnership. A key area is deep naval collaboration.
Okay.
We see regular joint naval patrolling and surveillance operations. This isn't headline-grabbing stuff usually, but it's the nuts and bolts of maritime security working together to monitor the vast exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, of Mauritius and surrounding international waters for illicit activities.
And India has provided very tangible support to help Mauritius literally police its waters, particularly against piracy, which was a major concern in the Indian Ocean, say, in the past decade or so.
Absolutely. India has taken concrete steps to boost Mauritius's counter-piracy and general maritime surveillance capabilities. This includes providing advanced light helicopters for aerial reconnaissance, sophisticated radar systems to detect vessels, and offshore patrolling vehicles, the actual ships needed to intercept and monitor activity at sea. These are substantial assets that significantly enhance Mauritius's ability to secure its maritime domain.
And it's not just equipment, it's also about building the human capacity to use it effectively.
Training is a critical piece.
Yes.
India regularly provides training for the Mauritian police force, particularly their National Coast Guard elements, and officers of the Mauritian Armed Forces. This ensures interoperability, professionalism, and the effective use of the assets provided. It's a long-term investment in Mauritius's self-sufficiency in maritime security.
A key moment solidifying this partnership was the India and Mauritius Maritime Security Agreement signed in 2017.
This agreement came during the visit of then Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth to India in May 2017. It formalized many aspects of the ongoing security cooperation and set the stage for even deeper ties.
One of the headlines from that visit was India extending a substantial financial commitment.
Yes, India extended a significant $500 million line of credit to Mauritius. Now, while this line of credit is for various development projects, including infrastructure, it certainly provides Mauritius with the financial flexibility to invest in areas that indirectly or directly support its strategic capabilities, like upgrading ports or surveillance infrastructure.
And during that visit, India made a very clear statement about its view of Mauritius's role and its own responsibility.
India asserted its position that as a frontline state in the Indian Ocean, collective maritime security is something India views as its responsibility to contribute to.
A frontline state.
Yeah, this frontline state concept is important. It places Mauritius at the forward edge of India's strategic concerns in the southern Indian Ocean. By declaring it a responsibility, India is signaling its commitment to actively ensure the security of key partners like Mauritius, which in turn safeguards India's own strategic interests further afield.
So India isn't just a security partner. It sees itself as a guarantor of sorts for states like Mauritius in the region. Is that fair?
Based on that statement, yes, it suggests India is projecting itself as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. It's about building a cooperative security architecture, where partners like Mauritius play a crucial role, and India provides significant support to empower them. The agreement itself reflects this comprehensive approach.
What was the scope of cooperation defined in that 2017 bilateral mutual maritime security agreement?
The agreement is broad. It covers cooperation to prevent both conventional threats, like state-sponsored actions, and non-conventional threats. The source specifically lists these non-conventional threats and key areas for joint action. Sea piracy, which disrupts shipping. Drug trafficking, a major transnational security issue that uses sea routes. Illegal fishing, which impacts the economic livelihoods of coastal states. And illegal exploration of marine resources, which relates to economic and resource security. It's a holistic recognition that maritime security today involves more than just traditional naval defense.
The sources also highlighted Project Trident. What was that about?
Project Trident was an initiative by the National Coast Guard of Mauritius, aimed at the integrated development of its coastal surveillance and response capabilities. It's essentially a plan to modernize and connect Mauritius's maritime security infrastructure.
Okay.
And critically, under the 2017 agreement, India specifically agreed to support Project Trident. This means India is providing technical, financial, or perhaps equipment assistance to help Mauritius implement its own national strategy for coastal security.
Were there other agreements signed during that significant 2017 visit that tied into the broader relationship?
Yes, the visit wasn't solely focused on hard security. There were MOUs signed on research and education in marine sciences and technology, important for understanding the maritime environment they share,
Makes sense.
and also on setting up a civil services college in Mauritius. This last one is interesting because it shows a commitment to building institutional capacity within the Mauritian government itself, recognizing that good governance is also a component of national stability and resilience, which are key for a strategic partner.
So let's dig into the analysis points here. Why is this frontline state concept and India's commitment to collective maritime security so important in the broader Indian Ocean context? And what does this level of defense cooperation, joint patrolling, gifting assets, training, supporting projects, what does it really signify about the trust and strategic alignment between India and Mauritius?
Well, the Indian Ocean is, without question, a region of increasing geopolitical competition. You have numerous global powers increasing their naval presence and influence. For a country like India, with a massive coastline and huge economic dependence on sea trade, maintaining a secure and stable Indian Ocean is an existential necessity. By positioning Mauritius as a frontline state and actively supporting its security, India is essentially extending its security umbrella and influence into a critical part of the southern Indian Ocean.
Okay.
It's about ensuring that this vital region remains open, stable, and free from hostile influence. It aligns with India's broader Saigar vision, security and growth for all in the region.
It sounds like India is seeing Mauritius as a key pillar in its regional security architecture.
Exactly. And the level of cooperation we're seeing is very telling about the depth of trust. Gifting significant military assets like patrol vehicles, conducting regular joint patrols, sharing sensitive radar information, providing training at your own institutions. These are actions indicative of a very high level of strategic trust. You don't share this kind of capability and operational space with just anyone. It signifies that both nations have a shared assessment of the security environment and are strategically aligned in how they want to address it. It moves beyond a transactional relationship into a genuine security partnership where interests are deeply intertwined. It shows Mauritius is not just a recipient of aid, but a trusted collaborator in maintaining regional stability.
That trust, built on historical ties and demonstrated through security cooperation, brings us to another major pillar of the relationship, the economy.
Ah, yes, the economic dimension.
Yeah.
Hugely significant and perhaps the most complex part of the recent history. As the sources note, Mauritius has historically been one of the top sources of foreign direct investment into India.
Which, as you pointed out earlier, is perhaps counterintuitive for some. This large flow of investment is largely linked to a specific agreement, right?
Precisely. The 1982 Convention for the Avoidance of Double Taxation and Prevention of Fiscal Evasion, the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, or DTAA.
The DTAA.
This treaty became the primary vehicle for investment flows from Mauritius to India.
What was the original intent of this treaty back in '82?
Back in 1982, the Indian economy was very different, much less open to foreign investment. The primary purpose of the DTAA with Mauritius, as outlined in the sources, was quite specific: to make it easier and more tax-efficient for non-resident Indian NRI investors to route their money into India.
Okay.
The treaty included a clause that exempted capital gains tax on the sale of shares in an Indian company if the investment was made by a resident of Mauritius. The idea was to incentivize NRI investment by ensuring it wasn't taxed both in Mauritius and India.
But then India liberalized its economy in the 1990s, and, well, things changed dramatically.
They certainly did. As India became a much more attractive destination for global capital, investors from all over the world realized they could structure their investments through Mauritius to take advantage of the capital gains tax exemption offered by the DTAA.
The loophole.
Exactly. This led to a massive surge in investments routed via Mauritius, and over time, this also led to the establishment of what were often referred to as shell companies in Mauritius.
Companies that existed primarily on paper in Mauritius just to route money.
Precisely. Companies that might have minimal or no actual business operations in Mauritius, but were legally domiciled there to qualify for the DTAA benefits when investing in India. The loopholes in the treaty became more prominent and concerning, particularly after incidents like the 2001 stock market scam in India, where questions were raised about the source and nature of some of the funds flowing in.
Right.
This prompted the Indian government to initiate serious negotiations to amend the treaty and address these loopholes.
So, a treaty designed to help NRIs became a major channel for a much broader range of investments, sometimes with concerns about tax avoidance.
That's the complex evolution. The DTAA became central to the economic relationship, but also, a source of tension due to potential misuse for tax avoidance.
And this brings us to the significant 2016 amendment to the DTAA, which the source is linked to the impetus from the 2015 prime ministerial visit.
Yeah, the political push from the high-level visit was crucial. After years of negotiation, the amendment was signed in May 2016.
What was the most significant change introduced by this amendment?
The core change was the removal of the blanket exemption from capital gains tax on the sale of shares in an Indian company for investments routed through Mauritius. Under the amended treaty, such gains would now be subject to tax in India.
So no more automatic tax-free ride for capital gains via Mauritius.
Not entirely automatic, no. And the amendment was implemented in a phased manner to allow investors time to adjust. The new provisions taxing capital gains on shares didn't actually apply until April 1st, 2017. Furthermore, there was a transitional period for investments made before April 1st, 2017, and sold before March 31st, 2019. These were taxed at a reduced rate, half the domestic rate in India.
Okay, so a softer landing.
Exactly. This phased approach was designed to minimize disruption and avoid spooking investors too much.
And how did the amendment specifically target the shell company issue? That seems key.
This was a very key element. The amended DTAA introduced what's called a limitation of benefits clause, which included a specific test to identify potential shell companies.
A test?
Yes. The source notes that any company in Mauritius routing money to India with an operating expenditure of less than 27 lakh Indian rupees, which was about 35,000 to 40,000 USD at the time in the preceding 12 months, would be considered a shell company established primarily to exploit the treaty and would not be eligible for treaty benefits. This provided a clear, quantifiable test to differentiate between genuine businesses in Mauritius and, well, paper companies.
That's a very concrete way to enforce the spirit of the treaty. So the 2016 amendment was really about reforming the DTAA to prevent misuse while hopefully preserving the flow of legitimate investment.
Exactly. It was a challenging balance to strike. Mauritius is a significant financial hub, and the DTAA was a major pillar of its economy and its connection to India. The amendment aimed to bring the tax arrangement in line with India's evolving tax policies and global efforts against tax avoidance, while maintaining Mauritius' position as an important investment partner, albeit under stricter rules. It reflected India's maturing economic relationship and its growing assertiveness on tax matters.
Beyond the investment route via the DTAA, is India a significant trading partner for Mauritius in other ways, goods and services?
Yes, absolutely. India is one of the largest trading partners for Mauritius in terms of goods and services. The source mentions bilateral trade figures, noting that in 2014-15, trade was valued at around $1.9 billion. So that indicates a substantial exchange beyond just financial flows.
And India also provides assistance for infrastructure and capacity building through lines of credit, you mentioned.
Correct. India extends lines of credit to Mauritius for various development projects, which are crucial for Mauritius's infrastructure development and capacity building. The sources give prominent examples of India-funded projects, like the construction of the Jawaharlal Nehru Hospital and the establishment of important cultural and educational institutions like the Gandhi Institute and the Tagore Institute in Mauritius. These are tangible signs of India's commitment to Mauritius's overall development.
Looking ahead, the economic relationship seems poised for further evolution.
Yes, both sides have been in discussions regarding a comprehensive economic cooperation and partnership agreement, or CECPA.
CECPA.
Okay, this would be a broader agreement, potentially covering trade in goods, services, investment facilitation, and other areas, building upon and potentially expanding the economic relationship beyond just the DTAA framework. It signals a move towards a more integrated economic partnership.
All right, let's take a moment to analyze this economic evolution. The DTAA was initially designed, you said, to ease NRI investment, but it became this channel for broader investment, sometimes misused for tax avoidance. How does the 2016 amendment represent a balance between attracting investment and preventing tax avoidance? What does this whole evolution tell us about the economic relationship?
Well, the initial design of the 1982 DTAA was very much a product of India's pre-liberalization economic philosophy. There was a desire to attract capital in a restricted environment, prioritizing inflow over potential tax issues, perhaps.
Right.
The broad capital gains exemption was intended as a strong incentive. However, as India integrated into the global economy, this very generous clause became a significant point of concern, facilitating things like round-tripping of funds and tax avoidance structures that were clearly not in the spirit of the treaty.
So the amendment was a necessary correction. A difficult one, maybe, but necessary.
It was arguably essential from India's perspective to address the erosion of its tax base and align with international standards on tax transparency. The 2016 amendment, by introducing taxation on capital gains and that anti-abuse test for shell companies, aimed to sort of ring-fence the benefits of the treaty for legitimate investors with real substance in Mauritius, while deterring those solely seeking tax advantages. The balance lies in trying to ensure that investment flows continue, but on a fairer, more transparent basis. It was a delicate negotiation because Mauritius benefited significantly from its role as a financial conduit, but both countries recognized the need for reform.
Right.
The phased implementation and the ongoing CECPA talks show a mutual desire to adapt and build a new, more sustainable economic framework for the future. It tells us that the economic relationship is mature enough to handle complex issues like tax reform, reflecting a commitment to making the partnership more robust and equitable for the long term.
It's clear this relationship is multifaceted. Let's bring some of these threads together by looking at specific key moments and case studies highlighted in the sources. We've mentioned the 2015 prime ministerial visit multiple times. It seems like a real nexus point for many aspects of the relationship.
It really was. The visit served to elevate and consolidate the diverse strands of the partnership, from strategic and defense to economic and cultural. It was a symbolic reaffirmation of Mauritius's importance to India at the highest political level.
And the symbolism started even before the prime minister's plane touched down, apparently.
Absolutely. The arrival of two Indian naval ships, INS Delhi and INS Sarvashak, porting in Mauritius just before the prime minister's arrival, was a powerful visual statement.
Yeah.
It wasn't just ceremonial. It underscored the centrality of maritime security to the relationship and demonstrated India's naval presence and commitment in the region, highlighting the operational dimension of the defense partnership already underway.
During that visit, key commitments were reaffirmed, including the line of credit we discussed.
Yes, the commitment to the $500 million line of credit was a major outcome. Beyond that, India also pledged assistance in helping Mauritius diversify its economy, specifically mentioning support for emerging sectors like oil and gas exploration, financial services, building on its status as a financial hub, and information and communication technology, ICT.
Right.
This showed India's willingness to invest in Mauritius's future economic resilience.
Maritime security remained a dominant theme, of course.
It did. PM Modi spoke explicitly about the need to resolve maritime conflicts through international law and reiterated India's commitment to supporting security and growth for all in the regions of the Indian Ocean, which is India's overarching vision for the region, Sagar. Mauritius is seen as a vital component in achieving this vision.
And one of the most tangible results of the visit was the gifting of a patrol vessel.
Yes, the commissioning of the MCGS Barracuda, a state-of-the-art offshore patrol vehicle, was a significant moment. What's notable here, as the sources point out, is that this vessel was built in India and then gifted to the Mauritian National Coast Guard.
Gifted, not sold.
Exactly. Gifting such a substantial military asset is a clear indicator of the depth of the strategic relationship and India's commitment to directly enhancing Mauritius's maritime capabilities as a partner.
Another key strategic development linked to the 2015 timeframe, although the agreement was formalized then, involves the Agalega Islands. Tell us about those.
Right, the Agalega Islands. They're an archipelago located around 1,100 kilometers north of the main island of Mauritius, so significantly closer to India's southern coast.
Okay.
They have a small population but are strategically positioned. There's also, interestingly, a notable presence of the Indian diaspora there, adding another layer to the connection. But their primary importance is strategic location in the Indian Ocean.
And the 2015 agreement gave India specific rights on these islands.
Yes, under an agreement signed during the PM's visit, Mauritius granted India infrastructure development rights, or IDR, on the Agalega Islands. This permits India to undertake specific infrastructure upgrade projects on the islands.
What are the specific projects India is undertaking there, according to the sources?
Based on the source material, India is refurbishing the existing airstrip on North Agalega, making it capable of handling larger aircraft and developing a new jetty on South Agalega, improving port facilities.
Okay.
The source also mentions the possibility of installing radar systems there, which would significantly enhance India's maritime surveillance capabilities in that part of the Indian Ocean.
The source is careful to specify that this IDR doesn't constitute India developing Agalega as a naval base, though.
That distinction is important according to the source material, yes. The agreement grants infrastructure development rights for specific purposes, not sovereign control or the establishment of a full-fledged military base. However, the source also explicitly states that purely as a strategic investment, these infrastructure upgrades certainly help India to increase its footprint in the Indian Ocean.
And why is increasing India's footprint in that specific part of the Indian Ocean significant?
Well, having upgraded facilities like a longer airstrip and a better jetty on strategically located islands like Agalega allows India to potentially extend the reach of its maritime patrol aircraft for surveillance, facilitate visits by its naval ships for refueling or logistical support, and generally enhance its ability to monitor and respond to developments in the southwestern Indian Ocean.
Right.
In an increasingly competitive maritime environment where various global powers are expanding their reach, having access to facilities like this enhances India's ability to protect its trade routes, counter piracy or other illicit activities, and act as a credible security partner in the region, aligning with that security and growth for all vision. It provides eyes and potentially rapid response capabilities in a key area far from mainland India.
Beyond the strategic and economic, the 2015 visit also celebrated and reinforced the deep cultural and people-to-people ties.
Absolutely. These cultural connections are, you could argue, the bedrock of the relationship. During the visit, the foundation stone was laid for the World Hindi Secretariat building in Phoenix, Mauritius.
Ah, yes.
Given that a large portion of the Mauritian population speaks Hindi and cherishes the language, this project underscores the importance placed on preserving and promoting this shared linguistic heritage.
There were also symbolic engagements with religious sites.
Yes, the Indian Prime Minister participated in a prayer ceremony at Ganga Talao, also known as Grand Basin, which is a very important Hindu pilgrimage site and shrine to Lord Shiva in Mauritius. These gestures acknowledge and honor the deep religious and spiritual bonds shared by the people of both nations, reflecting the strong Hindu cultural presence in Mauritius.
And the Prime Minister also spoke about Mauritius's own contribution to Hindi literature and enriching Indian language and culture.
That's a crucial point. It recognizes that the cultural exchange is not unidirectional. The Indian diaspora in Mauritius has developed its own unique cultural forms, including a vibrant tradition of Hindi literature that has enriched the broader tapestry of the language and culture outside of India. It acknowledges Mauritius not just as a recipient, but as a contributor to this shared heritage.
Specific agreements were signed during the visit to further these connections too.
Yes, there were MAUs on culture aiming to increase people-to-people contacts for the period 2015-2018, and another on the popularization of traditional medicine, like Ayurveda,
Okay.
which is seen as a way to boost cultural ties and promote health cooperation based on shared traditions. These agreements put structures in place to facilitate continued cultural exchange and collaboration.
And the focus on connections expanded to the younger generation with this initiative called YUVA.
UVA.
Yeah.
Standing for Youth United to Voluntary Action. It represents the growing importance attached to engaging the youth as future bridges between the two countries. It's a Mauritian organization deeply involved in community action and promoting social awareness among young people through voluntary activities and innovation.
And the fact that the Indian Prime Minister specifically called upon YUVA during his visit was significant.
It signaled that India recognizes the vital role the youth in Mauritius play in maintaining and strengthening the relationship going forward. It was an endorsement of their efforts and an encouragement for them to continue acting as a bridge between the two cultures and societies.
Yeah, for an anecdote that really shows the extraordinary level of political trust and, frankly, potential intervention in the past, let's delve into Operation La Dora. This sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It does, and it's a fascinating, albeit sensitive, historical incident from the early 1980s, highlighting the deep political stakes involved. The Prime Minister of Mauritius at the time, Anirudh Jugnauth, who had strong pro-India leanings, reportedly feared a military coup attempt by his political rival, Paul Berenger, in 1983.
He feared a coup and he reached out to India for help.
According to the sources detailing this incident, yes, Prime Minister Jugnauth contacted the then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi requesting India's assistance to prevent this perceived coup. This was a direct plea for intervention from the head of state of a sovereign nation.
And India's response was quite dramatic.
It was extraordinary, particularly considering the geopolitical climate at the height of the Cold War. The Indian government, led by Indira Gandhi, took the threat seriously and actually planned a military expedition to Mauritius. An Indian Army battalion was reportedly moved to Mumbai, preparing for potential deployment to the island nation.
A full military intervention planned, but it was aborted at the last minute.
Yes, the operation was aborted just before deployment. And the reason, as detailed in the accounts, wasn't a change of heart in Delhi, but the success of a simultaneous covert effort. The RNAW station chief in Mauritius, India's External Intelligence Agency representative,
RNAW.
was able to use intense negotiations and diplomatic channels to manage the crisis and avert the potential coup without the need for military force.
So intelligence and diplomacy prevented a military operation by India.
Wow. Exactly. It's a testament to the multi-layered approach India employs in its foreign policy, including leveraging its intelligence assets for diplomatic outcomes. The successful intervention by the RNAW station chief averted not only a potentially complex and internationally sensitive military intervention by India, but also prevented significant political instability and potential chaos in Mauritius itself.
Incredible.
It highlights the extraordinary level of political trust that existed, where India was willing to consider military action at the request of the Mauritian leadership to ensure stability.
And it's quite something that Anirudh Jugnauth, the prime minister who sought India's help in 1983, was again Prime Minister of Mauritius from 2014 to 2017, the period encompassing the major visit and agreements we've just discussed.
It brings that historical connection full circle, doesn't it? It shows the long-standing personal and political relationships that underpin the state-to-state ties.
So reflecting on these case studies, the strategic symbolism of the 2015 visit and the gifted vessel, the pragmatic strategic development on Agalega, the active promotion of cultural ties, and that remarkable historical anecdote of Operation Lal Dora. How do they illustrate the multi-layered nature of this relationship? What does Lal Dora specifically tell us about the trust and potential intervention India was willing to consider? And how do the Agalega developments fit into the broader strategic picture of the Indian Ocean today?
Well, these case studies are invaluable because they move beyond abstract policy discussions and show the relationship in action across multiple dimensions. The 2015 visit wasn't just a formality, it was a deliberate projection of the partnership's depth, combining security, economic, and cultural elements. Agalega shows the long-term, forward-looking strategic planning, identifying key geographic points to enhance India's capabilities. The cultural elements demonstrate the understanding that this relationship isn't just between governments, but between people, requiring active nurturing.
And Operation Lal Dora is the real outlier, revealing a level of involvement that seems almost unbelievable today.
It truly highlights the unique intensity of the political trust that existed back then, and India's perception of the stakes in Mauritius's stability. For a non-aligned India, at the height of the Cold War, when every move was scrutinized, to actually plan a military intervention in a distant island nation at the request of its leader demonstrates an exceptional degree of political alignment and strategic urgency.
Yeah.
It indicates that maintaining a friendly, stable government in Mauritius was seen as crucial enough to contemplate such a drastic measure. It speaks volumes about the historical depth of India's commitment to Mauritius's internal stability and sovereignty, albeit perhaps through a lens of ensuring a favorable political environment.
And the Agalega developments are the modern-day manifestation of that strategic interest, but pursued through infrastructure agreements rather than potential military intervention, perhaps.
Exactly. Agalega fits perfectly into the contemporary strategic landscape of the Indian Ocean. While not a base in the traditional sense, developing infrastructure there is about enhancing India's ability to operate, survey, and respond in a geographically critical area. It supports India's maritime domain awareness and its capacity to contribute to regional security alongside partners like Mauritius. Compared to the dramatic events of Lal Dora, Agalega represents a more measured, long-term, and importantly agreed-upon approach to enhancing strategic footprint through infrastructure and partnership. It reflects the evolving nature of India's regional strategy and the strength of its relationship with Mauritius. These examples, old and new, underscore the consistently high strategic value India places on Mauritius, adapting the means of engagement to the times.
It's truly a relationship woven from historical threads, strategic imperatives, economic ties, and deep cultural connections. From the indentured laborers arriving centuries ago to joint maritime patrols and complex tax treaties today, the India-Mauritius story is one of remarkable depth and evolution.
It demonstrates the enduring power of people-to-people connections to shape state-level relationships, and of course the strategic importance of islands in the vast maritime domain of the Indian Ocean.
And as the source material brings us to a close, the outlook seems to be for this relationship to continue deepening.
Yes, based on the trajectory we've explored, the strengthening defense ties, the recalibration of the economic partnership, and the ongoing cultural engagement. The relationship is indeed likely to unfold more profoundly as India continues to enhance its strategic footprint and role as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. Mauritius is clearly central to that vision.
This has been a deep dive that truly revealed layers of connection I hadn't fully appreciated before.
It's a relationship that serves as a powerful reminder of how history, culture, and geography combine to create unique and enduring strategic partnerships.
So, as you finish listening to this, here's something for you to consider. Given the increasing strategic competition we're witnessing in the Indian Ocean, with multiple global players asserting their presence, and considering the evolving economic landscape after the significant DTAA amendment, how might that unique blend of historical ties, deep cultural connections, and mutual strategic imperatives specifically shape the India-Mauritius relationship in the next decade? What specific opportunities or even potential challenges do you think lie ahead for these two nations as they navigate the complexities of the 21st century maritime world together?
It's a story that's still very much being written.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating relationship between India and Mauritius.